Hello, mediums! Welcome to our 4th episode of The Writer's Journey here on Keystroke Medium. Today we're having a special lunchtime episode of The Writer's Journey with Richard Fox and our very own Josh Hayes. Richard and Josh are two best-selling science fiction authors renowned in the indie world and have collaborated on the Terranova Chronicles and were recently both in the Backblast Area Clear anthology. They're here to break down author collaborations with us. So whether you're thinking of getting into a collaboration or want to know how to make one you're in work better, this episode is for you. We'll be answering audience questions live, so if you have any burning questions to ask them in the chat. So before we get into our questions today, first we wanted to just see what everyone's up to, anything exciting going on, anything you're working on currently. I know for me, I've got no new updates since Friday, so I'm still in the review process. Had some family over, so just doing some family stuff. Kayleen, what's going on with you?
I am just writing, getting the new anthology for near future, getting that plotted out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing exciting. Nothing terribly exciting.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that new Keystroke Medium anthology coming up. The submissions are in February. Is that right, Josh?
Yep. Into February.
Yeah. And so what are you up to right now?
Well, I am neck deep in my manuscript for Edge of Valor. I've actually been working on it all morning. I got about 3,000 words done on it. I'm close to passing the 60,000 word mark. And we're shooting for like 80 to 90,000 probably. I got to start plotting out my short story for Chris Kennedy's anthology that's due at the end of January. So I have some time for that. This weekend I did a whole bunch of family stuff. I had all 4 of my kids here, so we chased the Rugrats around and did kid things, and got a couple other deals going for the company that I think are gonna really do well this year. And it was super busy. I sold my truck, bought a car, and saved like almost $400 a month. I've been in a truck so long that when I went car buying, the prices for trucks are just ridiculously high. Like 35-40 grand is cheap for a truck. And so when I went searching for a car, I found a car for like 16,000. I was like, this is a brand new car with like all the bells and whistles, like completely has everything in it, and it still saves me $400 a month. I was like, sold. I'll take it.
Awesome.
So yeah, making some changes and doing some stuff that hopefully I can talk about here in maybe a month and a half or so. So very cool.
Nice. And Richard, what are you up to?
I am turning through Ferrum Corday, which is the 6th book of the Terranova Chronicles series, the follow-on to the Umbra War, and that's going to close out the 2nd volume of the Umbra War universe. And then also I working through the edits on the 3rd book with Josh. We should be getting those edits back from the editor tomorrow or Wednesday, and then we can go through the fun that is looking at all the red things and making them not red anymore. So. I had a short story in the Backblast Area Clear anthology came out last week, and then also had a kind of a short story in an anthology called Bob's Bar, which is more with the LMBPN kind of wheelhouse of authors. That's Mike Anderley's publishing house, and what he'll do is he'll get all of his writer, the authors who work for him, and other people who he knows, and says, hey, let's have all of our big characters come together in this bar and tell stories to each other.
Yeah, like a modern day Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, a little bit. It's just with more alcohol. And so so the first volume I had a character named Mark Barrow show up, and the second one I had a guy named Standish show up and steal things. That's what he does. So that's what I got going on. I'm working on book 5 there, and then we'll be getting book 3 of the Terranova Chronicles out next month.
Yeah, and those are all big authors. Lindsay Broker, Michael Cooper, is that right?
Yeah, it's a kind of it's a little fun. Well, not really fun. but you want to have this interaction with someone else's character, and you have to say, is this okay? Because that's someone else's baby. And if someone else says no, she would not say that, well, then she's not saying that. So it's just kind of, whoever edited this had to walk on a lot of eggshells to get it done.
And let's know how you guys did that, collaborated on that. But before we get to multiple author collaborations, perhaps we should talk about the two of you and how you guys were able to collaborate on your Terranova Chronicles. How's that for a segue?
There you go.
I mean, if you couldn't get any more pro, that was golf clap for Lauren for sure.
Okay. So where did you guys come up with the concept for your Terranova Chronicles and decide to collaborate together? Where did all that come from?
Well, it started with when I was ending the Umbra War series. It was a 9-book series, and towards the end, I wrote in a couple of trapdoors for myself because I knew I was going to go write this other series, and my fear was that other series would bomb, and then if I had nothing else, I would have nothing else. So when I finished the Umbra War, I had a number of little side plots. Like, okay, we can go with, well, where the heck did the Ibarras go? Or, just new bad guys show up. Or, hey, there's this Terranova rabbit hole where I had sent one of the characters' brother to. It was kind of like an insurance policy for humanity that, hey, just go to this planet in this galaxy near the Milky Way and you'll be fine there. So, and, so one of the plans was, okay, if these other series don't work out, I'll go back to the Terranova storyline. I hope people come back to that. But it was good and bad that the new series did very well, and then the was for the Exile Fleet, and then the Iron Dragoon series also did very well. So I was sitting there going, wow, I got a lot of right. I don't think I can ever get back to the Terranova story, which was, I had plans for it. It was actually pretty good. And so I said, okay, if I just write everything I want to write, it's going to take me a good year or 3 to get back to Terranova. And by then, all my readers are going to be like, Terra where? All right, fine. So I said, okay, let me go. As I'm like, who do I know who can write really well and knows the Umbra War universe? Well, Josh Hayes and Scott Moon. So I went to Josh and said, Josh, look, I got this idea. Here's the storyline I have envisioned for what happened to Terranova, because Hayes, or not Hayes, one of the characters named Hale going to Terranova was kind of like a big, well, what the heck? Towards the end of the Umbra War, it was just known that he was about to leave. He was going to be gone from the galaxy forever. So, and he was one of the main characters. So I think a lot of the readers were like, what happened to him? So knowing that, he had this obvious plot, thread or story arc to go down. And then I know Josh knows the universe. He knows how to write extremely well. So I was like, okay, how about we do this? And Josh was like, yes. So it did not require a lot of convincing, which was nice.
How did you know that you guys could work well together?
I'd been on his show, for a bunch. I met him personally, and then we'd had some really good back and forth about story points a couple times. Was he talking about stuff he was doing, and I would talk to him about, well, here's what I'm doing with this other thing, and he has some really good feedback for where I was going. Like when I was starting with Iron Dragoons, he said, you know what, you should really label that first chapter prologue. It'll make the whole thing flow better. I was like, oh my God, you're right. Thank goodness. So, and it worked. So Josh's kudos.
Yes. I did one thing that was a great contribution to Richard's Imbraverse, and that was changing chapter 1 to prologue.
Well, there's more to it. I mean, I was talking about other story stuff, and he's like, yeah, maybe have this guy do that. I'm like, yeah, you're right. So that's yeah, and I knew also that he could finish because he finished a lot of other works, and I've seen that he had stories put in anthologies. And one thing when you're writing for anthologies is stuff's got to be in on time. Otherwise, you're not in the book, and then people look at you funny, and you can't put your stuff in on time. Because when you're doing an anthology, there's 8 other people waiting for your stuff to come in. So I knew he could finish, which I think when you're doing any kind of collaboration, it's really important to know that the person you're writing with can finish.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that Richard said and asked when he first came to me with the idea to collaborate is he asked, you've read the Imbraverse series, like if you could write any story in the Umbra War in the Umbra War. Also after I think that was after Iron Dragoons came out. When we started, it was either then or I had read it like as a beta, and I can't remember if it was out yet or not. But he came and asked if there was one part of the Umbra War that you would write. What do you think it was? And here's a couple of what would you think it would be? And here's a couple options that I have in my mind already as potential spinoff series. And I was like, man, I don't know, like anywhere really. Like I love all the characters. I loved everything that he was doing with the series. But the one cool thing that I liked about Terranova when he brought it to the table was he said, I want to do Mass Effect Andromeda, but do it the way it should have been done. And like that really intrigued me. And I was thinking about just the logistics of writing in another person's world. Like he said already, with character, you don't want to write something that a character wouldn't do. And so not necessarily, I mean, I know the characters, but as they're presented, not as they're written. So it's kind of a different dynamic when you're talking about writing other people's characters. And I was like, if I want to do this, if I'm going to do this, I really want to create my own characters. And the best way to do that was to do a completely different thing and create completely different aliens and a completely different environment that I knew, like from beginning to end, like this is going to be something that Richard and I put together from the ground up, and I'm not going to miss anything. I didn't really worry about it too much, but some of the stuff some of the worry I had was that I would write something that was not canon, but in the universe, like in the Milky Way, that wouldn't be canon, and it would be wrong, and the readers were like, that can't happen because back in book 4 this happened over here, and no, you can't do that. But in Terra Nova I can do whatever the hell I want.
Right, exactly.
Ish.
So let's see. Bard of Today in the chat's asking if it's better to wait until you're approached or wait until you have a backlist and reputation and then you approach. I honestly think like that's sort of like an organic thing. I mean, it's gonna happen one way or another if you've read up on, read the universe of an author and think maybe you have something you can contribute to them. I mean, why not ask? You might be asked. I don't think there is one right or wrong way to go about the collaboration happening.
No, I completely agree. I actually the first collaboration I tried to get into was Galaxy's Edge. I reached out to Nick and Jason after reading Galactic Outlaws and said, I really like Galactic Outlaws. I want to write like a Han Solo-ish type book in your universe. And this was, I remember talking to Richard on the phone about starting Terra Nova. And so my pitch to Nick and Jason had probably happened like probably a month before Richard reached out to me. Maybe even just a couple of weeks before. Nick and Jason took the pitch. I mean, I spent probably 3 days just writing the pitch and sent, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 words to them as a pitch for a story. They got back to me actually probably a day before Richard reached out, and they were like, hey, we love the idea, but we're actually working on something else right now that turns out to be Order of the Centurion, but they weren't looking to do more. They weren't looking to have authors come in and do basically a Galactic Outlaws because Legionnaire had just hit huge, and so they didn't want to screw up that. They wanted to keep it as middle sci-fi, so they weren't doing any of that. So they turned me down, which is fine, right? And then Richard came in and found me out, and then also Steve and I started kind of a mutual thing. Like we just started talking about writing, and it just kind of happened. Hey, let's write a book together. So I've had it happen, all three ways that Kayleen just said, ask or get approached, or it kind of works organically. So I don't know that there's a correct answer, but I think you can have success any way that you find the collaboration, but it has to be for the right reasons. Not if you go and do a collaboration thinking that if you write with this person, it's going to make you famous, then I don't know if that's the right way to go. But like for Richard, I already liked Richard and I knew Richard and I knew that we really clicked together and I loved having him on the show and talking about writing with him. And so when he asked me, I mean, yeah, it's a life-changing thing, but I was like, but I like Richard. And so I know I want to write with Richard. It was, yeah, it's financial too, but it was also, I like Richard. I'm not going to go write with somebody I can't stand just to make a buck. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And then Richard, on your side, what qualities are you looking for in a potential collaborator?
It's that writing sample is the big thing. Or someone, if you're gonna even entertain a co-writer, you should say, well, show me what you've already written, and look through there and like, okay, this is this is great. This is it's not. Sometimes you've read some. Actually, we've all read something. You're like, what on earth is this? So it did not have problem with Josh or Scott. So it was, but having that writing sample of being able to, if ever you're going to approach someone to say, hey, I want to collaborate, you should have 3,000 to 5,000 very clean words to show that this is how I write. See how well, look, I'm good. Okay. So you need to have that kind of thing. That you're ready to show people. And then, and then for a lot of it for me was, lore. Because if we're going to write something together, and I had this whole nine books of backstory already, and to go to someone, you want to write? Here, read these first. It's kind of like, oh my God, is homework involved?
Right.
So he already knew that. So if somebody shows up and says, oh, we're just going to turn on the warp drive, I'm like, stop right there. We don't have warp drive. We do now. But,
we do now.
For completely appropriate plot reasons. So, yeah.
One of the other things I was going to tag on right to the end of that is one of the writing samples that Richard found of mine that he really talked about was the first short story that I wrote for Nathan Heisted in his Explorations anthology, Through the Wormhole. And he really liked those characters and really liked the story. And so, getting out there in anthologies like we're doing a whole bunch. So I have no doubt that the anthologies we're doing this year at KSM are going to make those connections where people see those characters or those stories that you're writing and like them, and vice versa. And those connections are going to start being made through that, through those stories and through the interactions with the authors.
That's going to be, yeah.
It's a good reminder. Yeah, if you're thinking of submitting, put out your best work. Submissions for the near future are due in February. So let's get writing.
True.
So Keely, you got another question for us?
So we have on here, let's see, Josh, you've talked about your collaborative process a few times on Keystroke. Could you sum it up quickly for those of us who have missed on those episodes?
Yeah, so it works differently for different collaborations, but specifically talking about Richard and I, what we do is we brainstorm collectively and figure out what we want to do with the book. The process has kind of evolved through 1, 2, and 3. I think that the process for book 4 is going to be a lot more involved than it was for book 3, for obvious reasons we get into later. But basically what happens is we brainstorm ideas and collectively decide what we want to tell in the story and come up with the major plot points. And then Richard takes all of that information and creates an outline. He's extremely good at creating kind of a scene by scene blueprint for me to just look at and go, okay, blah, 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 and type it out. And 9 times out of 10, if we do that process correctly, there are generally no hangups at all. I say 9 times out of 10 because one time it didn't work and there were hangups. And so like book 1 and book 2, for instance, I think I did book 1 in 2 months once we got started. It took us a long time to actually get started that's another thing you talk about for collaborations is how physically, how logistically you're going to do it. What programs are you going to use? It took Richard and I probably 6 months from the time we decided we wanted to do it to when we actually started putting words on paper. And then once we started that process and I got the outline from Richard, it took probably 2.5 months probably to write the first book. Probably about 2 months to do the second one. And man, probably like 6 months to do the third one. Oh gosh, it's a thorn in my side I got to pull out. But yeah, Richard does really good outlines, and then I go off that and produce the manuscript. Then we send it back to Richard, where he does basically a dev edit on it. He'll go through and make and look at, especially the characters that he's created, like Hale, Shannon Martell, those characters. He'll go back through there and really look at the dialogue that I have in there and what their actions are, and fix it to make sure that they're in line with his vision of the character. Some things I have in there that I think are cool, but might not work for the series, and then he changes them or just says no. And then sometimes I do things on purpose, which is fun because sometimes I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, Richard's gonna really freaking hate this, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's funny. And so I play games with myself and Richard, and now he knows that I'm doing, and he may look out for her, but I'll put in things that I'm like, yeah, I know Richard's going to hate this. I'm like rolling the dice to see if they make it through into the final manuscript or not. Some do and some don't.
Josh, you used to be a pantser, right?
I'm sorry?
You used to be a pantser, right?
I did. I'm a reformed. Yes.
So was Richard part of that reformation? Like, have you learned more about plotting from him? And if so, what did you learn about plotting from him?
So yes and no. No, in the fact that I outlined and have been outlining Edge of Valor for like 6 years because of the complex story that it is. But Richard's outlining process actually streamlined my idea of what I thought outlining was supposed to be and what it could be. Like I think of the Harvard really proper way of outlining, like Roman numeral 1 subject heading and then letter A and then blah blah blah. Like when you think of outlining, a lot of people see that and they're like, I don't want to do that. Well, Richard doesn't do any of that. He has the dots, he has the symbols for the lines, but they don't really mean anything. He's just doing that for speed of writing, because just you write, you hit enter, you write, you hit enter, and you can break them down easily for reading when you go back to see what you have on the outline. And so what he does is he does brackets for section headings, and then under that he'll have like the circle or a dot or whatever for an outline, and then start typing under there. He, like, for dialogue, sometimes there's dialogue that he wants in. Instead of doing this person said quotation mark blah 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 blah, he'll go first letter of their first name dash, this is what they said, no quotation marks, no nothing. So it's just a quick deal. It's almost like his outlines are really probably like really short, dirty drafts, like first drafts of novels, and really, especially the first one, which is like 15,000 words on an outline, was just a really like, you leave out all the fluff, all the color, all the everything that makes the book, and you just write the bare bones, and that's basically what his outlines are.
So Richard, from your side, like, how do you come up with your outline, or how do you go from a premise to an outline?
For all the whole outlining, I have whatever story I have, and I pose the question of what the book is about. Like Terranova, okay, what happened to Terranova? If you remember the story, Hale and his fleet show up and everyone's missing. Okay, so the question is, what happened to Terranova? So by the end of the book, you got to answer what happened there. And then I'll have the big beats in mind. Okay, fleet arrives on Terranova. They set down. Everyone's missing. They get a clue to where everyone went. They go to the other planet where they find people. New face-eating aliens. Well, they don't. But anyway, and then action ensues, and then you kind of you answer the question. Okay, now we know what happened to Terranova, and then you pose the next question of, well, what are these three new bad guys going to do, and how is the colony going to survive? So I ask I lay out the question and set about answering it, and then I'll just keep. Do I have there's some people have like the giant plot arc of stories. I don't really do that so much. Like, okay, I need a downbeat here, then I have to go up. It's more. She's like, okay, what's interesting to happen along the way, and then kind of expand out on those plot points.
So you've got a major plot arc.
Right. I know the major plot arc, and then one thing when I'm doing outlines, like specific character moments won't show up. Those will happen organically while I'm writing. Like when we were doing Terranova, it's there's a part where they're in this ship. It hasn't been named yet. The ship is going to another planet in the same solar system. And it's like, okay, well, they got to name it. Okay, then this opportunity showed up to let's have a really kind of funny character moment to kind of show how all these Pathfinders, these scouts kind of work together. So, and that character moments happen very organically like that when I'm writing, and that's just the way I tend to do it. So I will outline plot, and then character comes up along the way. Some people will be going crazy right now, thinking, "No, it has to be character the whole time, and the plot happens." But it's art. So there's no 100% right way to do it.
Well, he says that too, but then he gets to a point sometimes where I can see that he goes back after thinking of something after the fact, because you'll have all the plot points out, and then you'll have a lone bullet that's like, this person has to say this. And I read it and I'm like, come on, Richard, really? And then we work it into the book. But it's funny because there's some, and a lot of really key lines he'll put in, like they have to say this. And it really all the rest of the dialogue doesn't matter. And we can come up with that on the fly as we're writing the scene, but that you have to get to this point where this person says this. And so it's a good anchor point to say, we could play around with the dialogue it doesn't matter what anybody else says, but by the time we get to this point here, this character has to be set up in a position to say this line. And so it helps kind of direct the conversation. Sometimes you can get into having a conversation and you kind of lose direction on where it's supposed to go, and people are just kind of going, huh? Yeah, okay, back and forth, and it's very boring. But if you can find that point where you need to get to a specific dialogue, then you can kind of work that into the conversation kind of in reverse order almost.
Like reverse engineer that scene.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So we had a really good question from the chat just a little bit ago from Devin Ford. He asks, I have to take time to switch my mindset from post-apocalyptic back to sci-fi between projects. How do you transition between worlds when you're in other people's universes?
Very poorly. Very poorly. There is quite for me, you're shifting gears to get out of even from one series to another. It can take me like a good several days of just staring at the screen going, where was I? Because you go from one where here are your rules, here's your background, here's all your lore, and then you write that, and then you shift to completely something else entirely different. And it's like, ugh. And there are some people who have the talent to just go through that, right? Good on him. Good on that man right there, Mr. Hayes. I am not one of them. I realize this now. So, and it took me a while of floundering between projects to go, oh, I'm a monotasker. I should just write one freaking thing to the end and keep all that momentum going, and then switch to something else. And this is something, I've been writing for a little over 3 years, full time for 3 years now. And this is something I've realized about myself. And if I could just keep myself focused on just finish this one project, then to completion, then go do something else, you'll be a lot better off. So that's a lesson I've learned about myself. And I think every writer out there is going to be different. There's some people who can switch radically between genres, no problem at all. There's some people who realize I should just do all my post-apoc stuff before I go play with in someone else's sandbox. So.
That makes sense.
What about you, Josh?
I do. I can switch back and forth pretty easily. And but the reason I can do that is my process for writing is I separate it out. So I have my actual writing drafting time, and then I have planning and outlining time, and they're two completely separate things. I don't outline or plan in the morning at all. I refuse. That is my writing time. That is when I have to be putting words on the page that count toward my word counts. Um, but throughout the day, after that morning of writing, doing dishes, taking care of the kids, doing house business, going to work or whatever, I'm constantly in my head running through plot points and ideas. And I will plot out. So for instance, I wrote Terranova 1 and 2 back to back. And then I had to stop and write my Order of the Centurion book for Galaxy's Edge. Wasn't a huge change because it's still mill sci-fi, even though Terranova is really not mill sci-fi. It's more like kind of a space opera with military people ish. But Order of the Centurion was definitely mill sci-fi, but it's also in a completely different universe. And so the tech is different. The planets are different. The way that the characters interact and talk is different. But I had outlined that book from beginning to end before I finished Terranova 2 because I outlined it separately. And so when I made the jump, like there was a day, I think, of break in between. I just left that day as a break so I could clear it, everything like kind of recycle. And then I started on the Galaxy's Edge book. And then I did the same thing when I went from Galaxy's Edge back to Terranova. And then wrote Terranova all the way through while still doing notes for Edge of Valor and hopefully another Terranova series that I'm planning to write after this. But then when I finished Terranova 3, I had a day break and then started in on Edge of Valor, and I just go through my outlines. My outlines are pretty detailed, and like this book I've been working on for 6 years. So, I mean, I knew it already jumping into it. I didn't have to make really any adjustments.
Then Terranova 3 is drafted with the editor. It's been to the editor, now you're going to revise it. And then
right. It'll come back. I have an editor who's done all my Umbra War stuff, and she'll get that back to me later this week. And she's normally pretty good about like if something doesn't flow with just how I write. She'll be like, "Why does this guy say this here?" And I'll be like, "You're right. Let's fix that." So that'll come back, and then he and I will do edits, and then we'll get it all set up for publication next month.
Next month. Okay, that was my question. When can we read it?
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right. Consistently, Christy, she asked a question earlier. She asked, has there ever been any conflict with one or the other not meeting a deadline? Or has that never happened with your partnership?
No, it definitely happened. It definitely happened with Terranova 3. We had planned out to publish in the summer. I don't even know if we had a specific date yet, but we were talking about the summer. But yeah, I blew that. I blew it bigger than shit because I don't think I got the final draft to Richard by was it like November?
I bet November sounds right. Yeah, maybe like late October.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's gonna be worth the wait. I know it.
Right. It's it was also he had that to turn in, and then I also had my own other series to work on. So it was kind of, there's some collaborations where somebody, has a major life event and they're like, I can't write for 3 months. Please fix this. And then I was not in a position where I'll just finish it, give it to me. Because I was like, I have this other mountain of stuff that I have to also get out. So it was, if you have collaborations where it's just back and forth, one can compensate for the other. But sometimes when you've got other things also, projects happening at the same time, it's like, and now pick up that whole thing. It's like, I can't. I got to get the Terranova or Terran Strike Marines 4 and 5 and 6 out. So it was it will happen. It's no one is a machine. Everyone has lives, and sometimes things happen where Like people can't quite get there. And with Terranova 2, we put it under pre-order, and every time I do pre-orders, I ended up not liking it. So I keep wondering why I do it again. So so we didn't do Terranova 3 in pre-order, and that gave us enough wiggle room to get it all done. So, and for the readers, when it comes time for Terranova 3 to come out, we'll go to our folks and say, hey, you can get Terranova 1 for 99 cents today during the ramp up. So to get people like, excited to get back into the series. So, or get new people into that, into reading it.
And one of the things that you want to make sure when you are collaborating is like he said, life happens, but knowing your process will help you get through that. So like that's one of the things that Richard and I learned about our process. And you kind of get ahead of, you're like, we've done 2 books, like we've got this, right? Like we've got the process down. Well, then knowing we had the process down, we didn't fully follow through with the process on book 3. And that's, and Richard might think differently, but that's what I think kind of hung up the 3rd book is we worked through the outline for books 1 and 2 completely from beginning to end and worked out the plot holes all the way through both outlines for book 1 and 2. And then for book 3, we got about 3/4 of the way through the outline. Both of us were like, the rest of it will work out because we know what the end point is. And so I just started writing, and we never really kind of sat down and solidified like key points in some of the character arcs. And so when I got there, I got hung up, and it just like backed the entire process up. So when we start planning book 4, which should start here after the first of the year, we're going to. And do you want to talk about what we're doing with book 4, Richard?
Right. Initially, we thought that Terranova Chronicles would be 5 books, but then I was looking at what we had planned for book 4 and book 5, and I said, okay, you know what? There's book 5 really is the 3rd act of book 4, so let's put these together. It'll be longer. That's fine, because longer standalone books tend to equal longer audio books, and audio tends to be a growing part of total revenue. So, and as long as the story is good, no one's going to complain if it's too long. But if somebody's like, you just chopped off the end of the book and sold it to me as a 5th book, people will not appreciate that at all. So
right.
So we looked at like, okay, here's everything that has to happen in Terranova 4, and 5. Okay, we can make it all happen in 1 book. So we're just going to make it happen in 1 book, and I think the story will be stronger for it.
Agreed.
So what programs do you use for the collaboration itself? Like, do you
Word
your ideas? Word.
Yeah, Word.
Word. I use Scrivener.
Everything else is heresy.
Well, see, that's one of the things that slowed us. Said, well, that didn't really slow us down, but we started trying to do it in Google Docs, and then Google Docs really didn't work out for us, and then so we started doing it in Word. We did book 1 in Word. Because the original idea was I would write a scene or a chapter, and then Richard would look at it when it was done, and then kind of the whole process would be kind of organically rolling like this.
Too slow.
It's way too slow. So what we did was we just said, okay, you write the entire book, and then I will look at it after it's done. And so what I did was I in book 1, I took Word documents for every scene that we had and wrote them, and then when I was done, I put them all back together. Well, when I did book 2, I was like, he's not going to look at it till the book's done, so I'm going to write it in Scrivener. So I did. I wrote it in Scrivener, and then book 3 I wrote in Scrivener too, and then I just export to Word and send it to
him. So what do you use to write and oh no, you already answered that. Tripping over myself, don't want dead air. So
do we want to do that sample? You
guys do that. That'd be cool.
So the idea of samples, I really wanted to know what part of the book that you wrote that you really like.
Right. There's a scene where I talked about it earlier, where you have the characters are on this unnamed ship. They're going from one planet to another, and they're kind of finishing construction along the way. So Josh, you got it up?
Yep.
All right. So what happened is they decided to name the ship while they're on the way, and anyone who's ever been in the military will kind of spot what's about to happen. All right. I will do Carson's dialogue, and Josh will read the narration. At ease.
Carson walked along the front rank.
I've been around the Navy long enough to know that being on a ship that hasn't been properly christened is bad luck.
The Navy personnel gathered, nodded their agreement. Nunez held the bag in front of Popov, and she dropped dozens of slips of paper into it. Nunez then hurried over to Carson, handing her the bag, and fell back into the formation.
So,
Carson said as she shook the bag.
I've asked you all here to submit some names for consideration, and hopefully we've got a winner in here.
The crowd chuckled as one of the Navy ratings slapped another on the shoulder. Popov looked over and saw Nunez grinning, whispering something to Moretti. Carson finished shaking the bag and pulled out the first slip of paper.
The confidence.
One or two murmured acceptance, but the rest seemed indifferent. Carson shrugged, dropped the slip to the floor, and pulled out a new one.
The aluminum falchion?
Carson said, her brow furrowed in confusion. She mouthed the name again and tossed the paper aside. In the ranks of the assembled crew, someone failed to smother a giggle.
The schwanz.
Carson frowned and read it again.
What's a schwanz?
Several shrugged. The chief tossed the paper aside.
Oh, come on.
She held up the next slip.
The Richard head?
The shoulders of one of the sailors heaved up and down in silent laughter.
Spacey McSpace. Holy fuck. Okay, who did this?
Carson gave Popov a dirty look, and the junior Pathfinder opened her mouth to protest, but a grunt from West kept her quiet. Nunez in the back rank had a poker face.
Sparkle motion?
Carson tossed a slip over her shoulder and pawed through the bag.
I don't even know what a mudak means.
Popov grasped, hand over her mouth. In the back rank, a sailor buried his face in his hands, smothering his laughter. Carson looked right at Popov and read,
The Haywood you blow me.
Sergeant West stepped out of the group. All right, people, lock it up. Sorry, I stole Richard's line. It took a few seconds for the laughter to subside. When it did, West turned to Carson, jaw set, eyes hard.
Sorry about that, Chief. So this is how it's going to be.
Carson asked, holding up the bag.
Jokes. We got jokes. This is why we can't have nice things around here. Fine. The next name I pull out of the name is what we're going with. You guys want to explore the star system in the fart knocker or something? Be my guest. No more discussion. She
pulled out the paper, cleared her throat, and looked over the slip. Then dropped the paper without reading it aloud, her face red. Finally, Carson pulled another slip of paper out of the bag, read it, and sighed.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Valiant.
Aww.
Okay, that's we'll stop right there. So that was fun. It was just that was one of those moments. It's like, oh well, here's a chance of humor, and I talked to Josh about I say it was organic, but while we're doing this during the outline, I'm like, Josh, we're going to have sparkle motion mentioned in the book, which is a Donnie Darko reference for everyone who's playing the home game. So, and Mudak is Russian for schwanz. So,
yeah.
Big space.
Spacey McSpace. Yeah, you can't keep it too topical, but I think in the near future people will still be trying to name things like that after they hear on the internet, because someone in the UK made a mistake and said, "Hey, name our boat, internet." And the internet named it Bodie McBoatface, and that just keeps happening.
Then did they have to apologize for that? And
yeah, you figure they learned their lesson, but then no. And then someone I think her in Virginia, they said, "Hey, name this middle school," and ended up being Hitler one. And it's like, stop asking the internet to do that. It's not going to end well, all right?
There's an urban legend in central Pennsylvania that the Amish did that too with some of their towns. I don't know if that urban legend is true, but it has floated around. But yeah. All right, Kayleen, you got a question for us from the chat or?
Let's see in the chat. I know Christy had one up here, and now it's vanished. Oh, there it is. Has there ever been any conflict with one or? Oh, wait, no, you already read that. Never mind. No, I don't.
Oh, Walt
I
had
am
one.
today. Oh my goodness, it's too early. It's not an afternoon show for me. This is a morning show for me.
You gotta send some your way.
I know. I need.
Yeah, people in later time zones are all caffeinated right now, and the rest of us are like, wait.
Walt had a question. He asked, does your writing or outline format change when you work with someone else, or do you bring them into your methods?
When I'm working with Scott Moon, it's basically the exact same way. So it's Josh. I don't know if you do it differently with other people.
No, actually, I've just kind of hijacked your method. My brainstorming is different. So I've said before, I brainstorm on legal pads and then transfer all of this to an outline. And so like Richard doesn't do that, but that's how I do it. If I'm having a story meeting with someone, I'll have I probably won't touch a keyboard, and I'll do all of the notes for the story meeting on the legal pad. And then once the story is set and figured out, then I'll go back and work on the outline off the story notes.
Now, when Josh came out to Vegas back in February, and we sat down in my office for like a good 2 hours, I want to say, just riffing off each other for everything that was going to happen in book 3, and that was really great. And then when he came back out here in November for 20 books, we were going out to get hamburgers, and just like, over the course of like 10-15 minutes, we worked out like everything that was going to happen in book 4.
Yeah.
So I tell you what, face to face, or being able to sit there like, what about this? Now, how about this? Pterodactyls. Yeah, pterodactyls. Okay. So.
That was, first of all, that was one of the craziest things you said in the first planning meeting for book 3. He goes, and we got to have pterodactyls. And I looked at him and I go, pterodactyls? And he goes, yes, like straight face, like no joking. He was like, we will have pterodactyls in Terranova 3. And I'm like, all right. I wrote down pterodactyls and circled it. And we have pterodactyls in book 3 now.
And later on, we had a plot problem, and I'm like, Space tigers, yeah.
Oh, that works great. And space tigers versus pterodactyls works. I mean, it really works.
Yeah.
So, because
he agreed. Sorry. He says, I borrowed a lot of techniques for outlining from Richard.
Take them all, whatever works.
And consistently, Christy's asking, how many collaborations can you manage or be a part of at a time?
I'm juggling 2, and after Scott and Josh finish up, I don't think I'm going to do any more. Just not that I have anything against them. It's just what I'm looking at is like, okay, for me to managing 3 different series at the same time. I got my own, and with the 2 of them, and then every once in a while somebody will like, hey, write an anthology. I'm like, okay, and it slowed me down in 2018, and it cost me a good deal of momentum. So. And so some people can manage collaborations a lot better. I mean, this is something I learned about myself is like, if do you want to manage 5 things at a time? Like, no, because then I can't write my own stuff. And I like writing my own stuff. It's just the way I am. So it's like one collaboration I want to do in the future is where it's me and one other author, and we write, to our own character off of each other, against each other. So like I write my scenes exactly my way. He or she writes their scenes exactly their way and their own voice. So this way, there's no kind of conflict of like, it should be said this way. No, it should be. It's good for the reader, because when you're switching between the 2 characters, if you have your tone and your everything changed as well, it makes perfect sense. So that's one collaboration I would like to do in the future, but who knows when that will happen. So, but 2019, I don't want to pick up any new collaborations. That's that's me. So I think Josh he's got a whole bunch coming down to the pipe. So Josh is that kind of artist, and good for him. I think he's doing great things with it. So.
Yeah, I like the idea of switching from POV characters, because having a strong POV voice is one of the things I love best about certain books and certain authors. So if you found someone who has a really strong voice that also sounds good next to yours, that could make a really interesting book.
Yeah, and the way that I would want that book to go is that you don't know who the good guy is. If you're in one guy's perspective, you think the other guy's a bad guy. You switch over, and I know that guy's a dickhead, and here's why. So, and then I don't want I want the reader to be like, no, I like Bob. No, John's better. And then you have that argument. So that's one thing I was in the future. So we'll see.
Well, Scott, a follow-up question. He asked, at what point does your writing become a company requiring other folks so you can concentrate on writing? So, Josh, that might be, well, actually, either of you can really answer that question pretty well. Like, what writing by yourself as an author versus getting a team together? I think that's what he's asking. Team together to help you publish.
So yeah, like Richard said, I have several collaborations going at the same time. Some of them are well underway. Like Richard and I, we're almost done with Terranova. That should cap off probably this spring is when we'll have the fourth book done and out. I have a collaboration with Jeff Chaney that I'm not sure exactly when it's going to start. I have to get through a couple of books to get there. And there's some things happening that will affect the timelines there too. But as far as collaborations as you could manage, it really just comes down to how much time do you have to write? When you do collaborations, you also want to make sure that you're focusing on your own work as well. Like right now I'm switching between projects and I'm not writing two projects at the same time. Technically, I'm outlining other projects while I'm writing one project, but I'm never at this time anyway, I'm not writing two projects at the same time. That may change in the future where I write a little bit on one book for an hour and then swap over to another project and write on that for an hour. As far as what he's saying about a company required so you can concentrate on writing, at that point, I think you're not talking about collaborating. You're talking about bringing people into publishing. And so some people kind of get confused and kind of mislabel what they're doing as collaboration rather than publishing and or ghostwriting. They're two completely different things. If you're doing multiple things like that, where you have to hire people to come in and write, that I think is more of a company level thing than a collaboration thing. But like for me, I've got two collaborations that are going to happen this year for sure. My Edge of Valor series and hopefully a follow-on solo Terranova series that I'm working on. But I don't know that I could probably do more than that. I mean, you're really talking about a huge time investment, especially if you're not a full-time writer. And for me, I've got Keystroke to run as well. And so like for me, like in my writing time in the mornings, I turn everything off for like 3 hours in the morning from 4 to 7. There's absolutely no way you can get a hold of me unless you walk through my office door, because my internet and everything on my phone and it's completely turned off. I can't even get on the internet on my computer at that time in the morning, which actually it hindered me yesterday. I had a meeting with Guy at like 6 to work on some stuff and my computer had no internet. And I was like, how am I supposed to do this? And you can't change it after the session started. So, but yeah, it really kind of just depends on time and what you're looking to get out of the collaboration. If you're doing a collaboration just to kind of because you like collaborating with somebody and you like writing, then I really think you probably only need one or two. I don't think you're going to need to. Speaking from a creative standpoint, you get into doing like 6 collaborations, and I mean, what kind of input are you then having on all those series? I'm not sure.
It would be tough, but yeah, that's a lot of different worlds, characters. Keep straight in your head.
Right.
John has a question. If you're outlining a new collaboration, would you include exit points so you can end the series at book 3 or book 6 rather than at book 9 where you'd hope to end it? So I'm wondering if the collaboration isn't working, and then you can like get out of it without having to muscle through, 6 more books. I'm wondering if that's why he means.
Well, I think you should always have an endpoint in mind when you start a series. And if you go to someone else and say, let's just write epic fantasy, yeah, let's go. And it's kind of like, well, where the heck are you going? Because if you don't have an endpoint, if you don't know where you're going, any path will take you there. So you should definitely know your endpoint. So, and then with both what I did with Scott and Josh, as I said, 5 books or 4 now, and which is doable within the course of a year. If going to someone else and saying, let's do this for 20 years, like Brian Anderson and the guys who are writing the new Doom books, I can't remember the names right now, but Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, excuse me, they have been working together on Dune for, I want to say, 25 years now. That is a collaboration that is, that might happen once a generation. Yeah, something that long, and where these 2 writers click to that degree. So I never really planned on a 25-year writing relationship with anyone. I went to Scott and Josh and said, I think we can do this in a year. See what happens after that. So
yeah.
But I think it's definitely to have exit points, and then also as far as the collaboration of when it gets to the financial side, is like with both Scott and Josh, I said, hey, after 7 years, let's figure out the money thing, because like 20 years from now, I don't want to have to get on PayPal and send Josh 85 cents for the 1 copy of Terranova that was sold. So like after 7 years, we can look at, hey, do you just keep going on normal, or I give you X amount of dollars now, and then I don't have to send you money every month for the rest until we're old and gray. I don't want to be like 94 and then Scott Moon comes to my door, where's my 14 cents? It's because we'll be old, and that's kind of what will happen. So it's you're definitely having the exit point of, here's where the story stops, and then also here are the options for the financial obligation between the 2 of us also ends. It is good to have in there.
Yeah, I would say too that there's 3 things when you look at doing a series, and you mentioned doing a 3-book, 6-book, 9-book, or whatever. You look at doing a 9-book series and you think, how, like for Richard and I, we started off with 5, because a 5 is a good book. I mean, it's more than a trilogy. It's not a 15-book mega arc thing that we're gonna have to try to slog through and keep it interesting. So if you go into it going, we could do a 9-book series, but you don't have ideas for a 9-book series, that can get problematic when you are trying to keep it interesting as it's going on. For me anyway, if I've got 3 good ideas, there's a common thing where you have 3 good ideas, so you want to make 3 different books. My thing is, if I've got 3 good ideas, I want to put those all into the same book and make a great 1 book instead of 3 mediocre ones. The other thing is, if it's not, like Aileen said, if it's not working between you and the collaborator, if you guys are not jiving after you get into 2 or 3 books, then starting at a trilogy will work out, because then you're like, all right, we're done. Thanks. It's been fun, but I don't want to do it with you anymore. And then you've capped it. Or if the series just doesn't work, like if you publish it, you say you guys are jiving and whatever, like if Terranova would have flopped, right? Then we've got these 5 books. Now we probably were, I didn't think it would, but say you write a series and you're really excited about it and it flops and you've got 9 planned out, like what do? Do you just say, well, okay, never mind, and stop? Or do you slug through and you do 9? Whereas if it flops and you only have 3, like, we can maybe work on the 3 and get them done. It's not a huge time commitment at that point, and you can have a finished series and move on. But I guess it's really up to the individual collaborators, I guess.
So the most important thing is having that really solid story and making sure that your ideas are coming together as collaborators, not necessarily sticking to that number you decided ahead of time. You're going to have so many books in that series.
Yeah, I mean, if your collaboration process is come up with idea, question marks, profit, you got a problem. All right, so you need to know, here's the final end state of these 3 to 5 or however many books. Here's the idea, the strong idea for each single book. Here's, you understand, I'm going to write this, you're going to write this, you're going to write, then I'm going to write that. And this is how all the advertising is taken care of. This is who's paying for all of the the art and the editing, and that's how this is going to get blocked out. This is when you're going to get paid. Have it all out up front. You know, if you just kind of like bump into someone at Starbucks and say, "Let's do fantasy," okay, it's not going to work. It's but the more you plan at the beginning, the more likely you are to succeed.
And you guys also like have contracts that you have drafted, signed before anything.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion people should not work without a contract. That's just me.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Every collaboration that I do, and then also every anthology that I do, there are contracts involved. So there's no question about who's doing what or who's paying what or what the compensation is. Always have contracts.
And where did you get those contracts?
I'm friends with Mike Anderley, and he does a lot of collaborations. So I just send him an email. It's like, Mike, can I borrow your contract? He's like, yeah, sure. You send it over to me on Word. I change a few things around, and boom, there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, he sent me those contracts. When we've done contracts like between Jason and Nick and I for the Order of the Centurion books, they have like a whole slew of lawyers that put together their stuff. So their contracts are like 1,800 pages long. But I mean, they both do the same thing. And then like the contracts I have for the anthologies, those are pulled from a couple different contracts that I've personally had. So I'll pull some things out of this contract and another thing out of this contract, and just to make sure that everything is covered for the author that is writing, and also us as a publishing entity. But I mean, even if it's something as it's a simple Word document where you write on, this person's going to write this many words and this person's going to write this many words, and we're going to publish a novel that's this many words, and then we're going to split the profits 50-50. It's better than nothing. But I mean, if you need a sample contract or you're looking at doing it, then just reach out to me or Richard. We'll definitely send you templates of what we have, so you can see kind of what the legalese is for the collaboration.
So you heard it here. Josh promises you reach out to him, he'll get you a contract if you need it.
That's right. That's right.
And Papa Chuck agrees, contracts always.
Yes, definitely.
Well, speaking of Nick and Jason, we're going to have them on the show on Thursday, and we're going to talk about generating ideas and where they get all their ideas from, and so many in the book. I think they have the same mindset as you, Richard, in that you want to keep fun things happening throughout the plot and not let your pacing kind of lag. So we'll talk to them about how they do that and how we can do it too.
I think we've all read those books that come later in the series where it's just people sitting around talking to each other. You're like, why? What's going on here? And then,
yeah, keep action happening.
So we are a little bit over the hour. Did you have any lingering questions that you wanted to sneak in there, Lauren?
Maybe just for new collaborators, any last minute tips you'd have for them starting out a collaboration?
I definitely say just know your collaboration. Know the person you want to work with. It's on some collaborations. It could be about money, right? Like, but you want to do it for the right reasons. And if you're just starting out, start small. It doesn't have to be a novel. Like Scott and I have collaborated short stories before. And that is a super easy, super simple way to find out if you're even compatible with that person to collaborate with. You want to get a hold of somebody like, hey, you want to write a short story together? Or like for Scott and I, we wrote 2 that were interlinked. And so just to work out your processes on the short term and see if that even works, I suggest doing that. That's probably the easiest way to go for people starting out.
What about you, Richard? Any tips?
What I'd say is if you want to have a career as a collaborator, it's not quite the same as a career as writing your own name, right? So know what your end state is. There's some people who work really well as collaborators. There's some people who they don't quite they end up getting a lot of earning a living as a ghostwriter. And figure out kind of what where you as a writer are going to go. Are you going to be that person who has your own series, your own books, Or are you do you realize that your pathway to success is working with someone else and kind of riffing on their ideas and building that way? There's some people who you tell them, here, sit down and write 80,000 words of your own stuff, and they can't do it. And some people are like, well, here's this idea, blah, XYZ, expand on it, and off they go to the races. So, for everyone who's out there, you figure out what kind of writer you are, and just understand that if success success for you is writing full time, supporting your family, and earning and creating art that you really enjoy, then do that. And it doesn't matter if you are it's just your name on the spine, or you've written under someone else's name, or you're sharing spine space, or whoever else. Okay, so put the ego aside and figure out where you're going to be the most successful, and go that direction.
Absolutely.
Awesome. You guys have a lot of great tips, info given, and we appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you, everybody who's been watching in the chat.
Thank you, chat.
Let us know what you thought about the show in the comments below, and be sure to give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. We'd love to hear from you. For Lauren Moore, I am Kayleen Williams. Thank you for joining us on your writer's journey at this AM, slightly PM show time. Be sure to come back and join us next time as we talk about reading, writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.